Hello. Ladies and gentlemen, we're about ready to begin. I have the pleasure of moderating this esteemed panel. My name is Morris O'Kelly. You may know me as Mo Kelly, host of Later with O'Kelly on KFI AM 640. Thank you very much. All 10 of my listeners are here. I appreciate that. But we have some very talented people in the house. Let me just very quickly introduce these individuals. From Disturbance in the Force, we have the executive producer. Is out here? Adam. Well, you're supposed to be joining us. We can put you on Bruce's lap.
Yeah. Believe me, there's room.
That's Santa Claus. Come on.
A family I just evicted. Come on in.
Come on down, Adam Goldberg, executive producer for us, Disturbance in the Force. And who you just heard is also producer Kyle Newman. Please put your hands together for Kyle. And Steve is running to get an extra chair, but coming back to the stage right now is producer Steve Kozak. And on our casting couch tonight, we have Lenny Rips, Emmy-nominated writer for such iconic shows as Full House, Bosom Buddies, Even Sunny and Cher. Also the screenwriter for Flink and Weenie, but most importantly, he joins us as one of the writers for the Star Wars Holiday Special. Please welcome Mr. Lenny Rips. Woo! Let me just say, he told us a great story about Red Fox that I cannot repeat here, but he is a wealth of Hollywood information. And next to him, also joining us tonight is Bruce Vilanch, two-time Emmy winner. Long associated with the brains behind the Academy Awards telecast, even writing for the Tonys, TV Land, and SAG Awards, to name a few. Star Wars Holiday Special won none of them. Vilanch was also head writer for the iconic game show Hollywood Squares, but most importantly, he too was one of the writers for the Star Wars Holiday Special. Please welcome Mr. Bruce Vilanch. And also a co-producer for A Disturbance in the Force. Please welcome Jason Lenzi. Did I get everyone? Okay, I'm going to get everyone involved very quickly, and then we'll break it down. If I say the Star Wars Holiday Special in 2023, give me one or two words. What comes to mind?
What comes to mind is what happened in Congress today. Kevin McCarthy blames Matt Gaetz, who blames Joe Biden, and the only people who can screw are America. That to me is the holiday special.
Bruce, the holiday special.
I say, what people don't realize is that it was just another show at the time. And it had not yet become, Star Wars had not yet become the Scientology of the nerds. People who have the religion of Star Wars, a lot of whom were actually in this movie, have a whole different take on it than those of us who are actually there. You know, but I'm sure if you actually ever met a Titanic survivor, they would tell you a story you wouldn't believe.
Jason?
I would say that it's
Push up on
Here.
I would say that it's a bit of insanity that we're lucky to have. It's of its time, but I'd rather have it than not, I think.
It's bizarre that we're still talking about it.
Is it pushed up?
It's bizarre that we're still talking about it. It's wonderful that we're still talking about it. It's amazing that we get to talk to the people who made it. I'm just proud that this is like a time capsule. We can look back at this really special period that's very undocumented. So it's a treasure.
I'll say the birth of my favorite Star Wars character, Boba Fett. Until I saw Boba Fett the show, and now Cassian Andor is my favorite character.
Steve?
Maybe reconsider the fact that all that's that bad is good. That stuff that is so bad it's good isn't always the truth. Sometimes things are just so bad, they're just bad. And that's always a bummer.
All right, let me be a contrarian. I saw it live. I was a kid who saw Star Wars when it was originally in theater. Saw it with my father and grandfather at Century City. So I was about maybe 7 years old. And I remember seeing the Star Wars Holiday Special. And for me, I enjoyed it. I saw Diane Carroll, I saw Harvey Korman, I saw all these wonderful actors and actresses. I saw Maude. I know her as Maude, not a B. Arthur. So, am I wrong to say that it was the right thing to keep the Star Wars legacy going when there wasn't even a legacy at that time? So I put this question to you, Bruce Vilanch. Is it really as bad as people say it is now, or is this revisionist
I always
history?
tell people if we'd known we'd be talking about it 40 years later, we would have paid closer attention. Yeah, and also it was the 70s, and so there was a great deal of chemical additives. And so we thought a lot of stuff was just great, except that there were a lot of those kinds of shows. I mean, the way you see SeaWorld is not just a casual reference. I think that obviously George would probably say if he was going to concoct something to keep the Star Wars thing on a boil between A New Hope and the Empire, he would have done something else. I think that if he knew they were going to turn this thing into a variety show, he would not have sold them a story where the lead characters sound like fat people having orgasms. Trust me, I know. So I think that he would have approached it differently, but he was unschooled in that area. So whether it was the right thing to do at the time, it was what happened. It was what CBS came, and what we had mentioned is that all of those people were CBS stars: Art Carney, B. Arthur, I forget who else, not Diane, but it was supposed to be Cher who was a CBS star. But so that was all. That was the network saying we've got to cross promote.
Adam, there is what the holiday special was, and there is what you wanted to tell as far as the story about the holiday special. Did you go in expecting to tell one story and it turned out to another, what we saw on the screen today, or what we saw today, was that pretty much the story you wanted to tell?
Well, I would say the way I came into this, Kyle and I actually started our career. The first thing we ever did was a movie called Fanboys, which Kyle directed. I co-wrote The Winning Time. It's about Star Wars fans. So whenever there's a Star Wars project, Kyle or me will give each other a buzz and go, we're gonna do this. So Kyle brought me into this one, and a lot of stuff had been shot. And this, look, I think this is the right story to tell, right? It's I didn't grow up on these variety shows. I was born in '76, so giving
You're
the
a child.
I'm a child. I'm now a 47-year-old child. But to basically to present to a large audience what the variety show is, I think was a really important thing to give that context, and then to tell the story of how this happened. I think that was already in place when I came, and what I did was I helped get some of these interviews and watch cuts. And I do want to say, my favorite part of the doc is the idea of, I'm a writer, do you take your name off of stuff that you like or that you don't like? And I love that moment of the doc. It's such a special moment to me, because it is like, do you have to own the things even if you're not proud of it? And that's something that I struggle with too. So that really speaks to me. And yeah, I really hope, I would hope that George, I really wanted George to do an interview for this doc, really. Because I wonder where he does stand now. We can only guess, but.
I think the biggest thing, us going into it, working with Jeremy and Steve, the co-directors, their vantage in was, how do we give this context? Because, like people said, it's been the butt of a joke. But there's generations of people that don't understand the context, the frame of reference, the entry point, and that was what's going on in the generation. And now, you asked the question prior, like, what would you do? Like, did it do its job keeping Star Wars alive? Star Wars became this juggernaut which was all about multimedia, comic books, action figures, board games, video games, novelizations, expanded universe. They didn't have that then. So this did that job. It was the baton that let it get passed forward. It did put Star Wars back at #1 at Labor Day. These type of things. Variety shows help Star Wars stay relevant. So it did its job, and I think the goal of this movie was to provide context to people that have never seen it. I think this is the best way to maybe watch the holiday special and learn about it, is because you're getting the context with some highlights. So if you've never seen it, I think it's a good way to first experience it maybe before you even dip your toe in.
It did get a decent rating, actually, and the reviews were not as terrible as we expected.
Let me just give some context to that. 13 million people did watch it that night live. So we're talking about a world with 3 networks at that time. So it was easier, I guess, to get eyeballs. So it did not perform poorly, but to also give some other context, MASH final episode got 106 million. So what, Bruce, let me say right with you, what did it say about the people tuning in the next day? Were people associated with the production, were they pleased or were they disappointed?
It was a Saturday, so nobody talked to anybody. Yeah, we were all suddenly Shomer Shabbos. We were all just sitting there, we're not calling.
They were all praying that nobody would see it.
We all just kind of remarked that, that was crazy, wasn't it? I mean, that was just completely nuts.
But I gotta say, the thing that I got from it is that everybody on the screen was talented. It isn't as if they hired anybody who wasn't good at what they were doing. And I think that's important.
I know for years I said to Diane Carroll, this is the first example of an interracial, interspecies love affair on network television, Where's our image award?
The thing that I get, it's like being a welder on the Titanic. Each one of these guys did a perfect rivet, but the damn thing still sank.
Jason, let me ask you this question, and I'm intentionally not asking Adam on this because I want someone with a different perspective. I'm quite sure when you're amassing these interviews and these conversations, there's a lot that ended on the cutting floor, or there were conversations or remarks which were made that the interviewee did not want in the special. Give us one of those stories.
Oh, that should be a Steve, one of these guys' question, actually. Steve would probably have a good answer for that.
Steve?
One more time, I'm sorry.
I'm quite sure there were a lot of anecdotes, stories, maybe remarks which were made that did not make the documentary for what other reasons. We know there were some people who were reticent to talk about it at all, and others who were very effusive, but you have to make some editorial decisions. What was something that you remember that did not make the documentary?
An hour of Gilbert Gottfried.
What about the Grace Slick?
Oh, we never interviewed Grace Slick.
No, but the story.
Oh, the story. Oh, yeah, and I will make a pitch, I'm sorry. I did write a book on this. It comes out November 15th on Applause Books, and I'm really excited about it. And what Jeremy needs a shout out too. Jeremy is my co-director, co-producer. He's not here, he couldn't make it, and it's not because he's in Utah, it's because he's babysitting. And Jeremy had done some documentaries, and he had edited Napoleon Dynamite. I mean, he'd been through the ringer on some, and he really showed me how it's so hard to kind of go down these rabbit holes. You just gotta keep moving ahead. And Kyle was mentioning this really great story. I thought was this. I found an article that was about Grace Slick had found out that and it was an actual Gannett news story article that she had tried to get into the CBS CBS security, that she was calling up and badgering them. She had just heard that they were filming down there, it's Jefferson Starship, and she wanted to get in. And she was really upset that they had gone without her. She, of course, was still in rehab, but she had made these phone calls, and it made the news that she was like harassing them, and that her face apparently was like, "Don't let this woman in." There was a picture of her in the studio, and this was an actual Wire story. But when you're co-directing, you have to you kind of play it back and forth, and it is a challenge. And It was a great experience working with Jeremy. We did have to kind of like, okay, you win, I win, you win, I win. And he won on that one. I really wanted to include it, but it was a wire story, and it kind of moved. It didn't really move the story forward, which Jeremy kept pushing, and it did have a good tempo to it without it. But it's a great story. I mean, that Grace Liggett. I think Jeremy put it well in my book. I'm sorry, Kyle. You had said something like. You said it's such an unbelievable irony that here's the worst thing that anyone has ever been in. All these people associated with it, and this is a woman who risked going to jail to break into the studio to be in it. And,
See, that's a good one.
And there was a story too, which you always. I just wouldn't put it on film, but you kept saying, tell the story about George Lucas's kids. And I was like, I don't know if I can say it, but I'll say it to Footage Fest.
there you go.
So, yeah, I was staying at the Skywalker Ranch. Ernie Klein, who co-written Fanboys, was up there, and we were hanging out with George Lucas's kids. And George Lucas's kids were in the room with us, and it was like late, and we're like, let's watch something. We had a computer, and we were watching old Star Wars commercials, and Kenner toy commercials and stuff, and Ernie brought all these discs up. And at one point we're like, well, let's watch the Star Wars Holiday Special. And his kids are like, what's that? We're like, wait, your dad made a holiday special? And I'm like, no, he didn't. And I'm like, yeah, there's a Star Wars Holiday, are you serious? And I'm like, no, he didn't. And we put it in, and they're like, no, wait, Dad made, what? They could not believe it, like he erased it from their existence. Like he didn't want them to know it. And they're like, 17 and 20 maybe at the time. So we just fast forward right to the Diane Carroll stuff with it. And we're like, your dad invented VR porn. And they're like, oh my God. And like, they called him, he said, why the hell would he show you that? Why is Newman doing it? Like I think he was so angry that I exposed his kids to existence.
Exposed, you said.
Exposed is always exposed being the right word for that.
Yeah.
Can I jump in, please?
That was kind of crazy.
I wanted to add to what they were saying earlier about why this is so important. I think why this story is so important is that Star Wars has now become so mythical, it's become so part of everything that characters like, Hammerhead now have first and last names, and they have a law practice and a family of 5, and they live in Detroit. Every single thing has a history to it, and a larger fiction in the tapestry. This is the thing that nobody knows anything about. Like there was so little information that anybody really tackled that it is a missing link to the rest of the larger universe, I think. And that's why it was so cool when Steve first told me about this 100 years ago. I said, yeah, this story needs to be told. Like, no one's doing this. It's just sort of being forgotten. And in the time that he had sort of been talking about it, and then it started to happen, you just would see these little bits of, oh, there's a T-shirt at Disneyland that has Life Day on it, or there's a, where it just started to, the dam started to break, kind of. And now it's beloved in.
And they announced this year's Comic-Con, they announced that they're making the Chewbacca in the red Snuggie action figure with the orb. It's an official Kenner 3 3/4 inch action figure coming out, I think maybe by Christmas time. So it's being merchandised, and the dam's opening up. And you know what's great about this movie is we poke fun. People who made it poke fun at the movie, but it doesn't have a mean bone in its body. It's not a mean movie, and I don't think you have to be, except for to look at something in a well-rounded way. And that's why I'm so proud of Steve and Jeremy, and the way they told the story, and the way they used all this ancillary stuff to kind of give you a real portrait of 1978 in landscape.
Let me be a contrarian again, and since Adam revealed that he's too young to remember this era, I think that going the variety show route was the best choice for the time. For example, how else would you be able to get Star Wars exposed to the larger television community unless you put it in a variety show format? I'm talking about the shows like Flip Wilson, obviously Donnie Marie. How are you going to get them on the same stage as Bob Hope otherwise? Or other than Johnny Carson, was there any other option?
Yeah,
Lenny, Bruce?
Well, I don't disagree with you. I just think there was a better way to do this show, and George walked away from it. he had this one idea that he had left over with the Wookiees, and he was determined to do that. And at the time, I remember saying, you know, they don't sing, they can't dance, they're not really mimes because they're under so much costume and makeup that, I mean, what are we going to do with them? If you want to do a show that is moved along by song, you take other characters and do it that way. But he was very perfect about what he had planned. You know, he said, I'm going to make 6 movies, and he did make 6 movies. He took a little break in between, but he did. And then, so I think it was a great idea and a funny idea to do a show with Star Wars. It just wasn't. This idea was not a good version of it.
You know, I also think that he knew there were going to be problems. The reason he hired my partner, Pat Croft, and I at first was because we had written for Shields and Yarnell.
Ah, right.
Mimes.
They were mimes.
We had written for mimes. And he said, I want you to work really hard for the first 15 minutes to do mime stuff, to get ideas across. And exactly as Bruce said, Shields and Yarnell did not dress like assos.
They were mimes. They were in tights, and they did Marcel Marceau kind of mime.
So, and that is a valid way of telling a story. But these were not the characters to do that.
Right, exactly. So we had to bring people in, as we say, like Art Carney, to literally translate what they were saying, because it was before the era of subtitles. The irony is now, I know Lupita Nyong'o a little bit, and she's made, I think, 3 Star Wars movies, and has not said a single word in any language anyone knows. Everything she says is subtitled in every one of those movies. With 1978, no, it wouldn't have happened.
Adam, I don't think that necessarily you take yourself too seriously, but I think you take your work seriously. Given the reality that we're losing more and more people from the original Star Wars universe, was it ever a question or something that crossed your mind about getting this done as soon as possible? I was watching this documentary, and a lot of the people who are in the documentary are no longer with us. Was that ever a conscious part of your production?
That was a huge issue. Steve Binder was actually the first person I talked to about this. He was a family friend, and I was helping him with clearance for some special he wanted to bring out, and I started finding out about the special, and I noticed he was telling me he had an eye problem, and he was slowly losing his eyesight. And not like it would have mattered in the interview, but I know he would have been more insecure about it. And I had talked to a couple of different people about rushing something through and trying to just get a camera and start shooting and making a deal. And every partner seemed to be like wanted like to make fun of it or just throw rocks at it, which I, respectfully speaking, I can't stand that Mystery Science 2000. I really can't. Because all it does is just throw rocks and stuff for an hour and a half, and I can't handle that. I think that there's something to be said about throwing rocks at something for 3-4 minutes and then finding out why it happened. So, but as far as that's concerned, there was a couple people that had really had bad health. Steve Binder is blind now. And it's heartbreaking because I really, it makes me feel happy because I found Jeremy. Jeremy agreed with the way we would set the tone, and we wouldn't make fun of it. And he also agreed that he bonded with me that to tell a story, you have to really tell a story. It's more about variety TV than it is about Star Wars. And that's where I had come from. My family, my parents, my current job, I come from TV variety. So I felt like I don't want to make it all about my people and everything. But he did agree that it had to be told about variety TV. But Jonathan Rinzler in this, if anyone remembers Jonathan Rinzler, had wrote a lot of the making of books. He had major cancer at the time. And when I was in San Francisco interviewing the Jefferson Starship folks, he drove 6 hours south from somewhere up by the border and wanted to be in it so bad. He was dressed in black, and as you saw, that's why he had the cap, and he was like, do you want me to do this? I said, I don't care what you do. and he was insecure about do you want me to show my hands? And I said, I don't care. I don't care what you look like. No one cares what you look like, it's what you say. And to me, he's the most special part of the documentary because it was his last interview, and he was just, if you see a documentary, there is a point when you kind of fall in love with 2 or 3 talking heads. And to me, he's the one who everything that came out of his mouth was just like gold. I mean, Kyle has a way about saying things he just rolls off. It's just so poetic the way he talks. But this was his last hurrah.
Can I tell a story? I don't know if I told you this in the interview, but about somebody who's gone, Carrie. Carrie, her deal breaker was that she got to sing a song because she wanted to have a career as a singer-songwriter. She had been in her mother's stage act, and she didn't want to do that. She wanted to really be a serious singer, and she was going to have this thing. And so at the end of the show, in that last sequence, there was a chance for Princess Leia to sing a song, and but it had to be some kind of a holiday song, because we had made up this holiday, Life Day. And she said, well, there's this Joni Mitchell song called I Wish I Had a River I Could Skate Away On. And it's a Christmas song, basically. But it fell under the holiday, banner. And so we had to call Joni Mitchell and ask her. And Carrie and I called Joni Mitchell, and Carrie said, well, and she laid out what it was going to be, and Joni Mitchell said, so it's the princess from Star Wars, and she's going to sing my song about the river in Canada for the holiday. And will she be surrounded by aliens? I said, yes, it's the finale, it will be. And she said, what a wonderful idea. No! And so Ken and Mitzi wrote the song that she sings. But I still think of what a rejection from Joni Mitchell, One for me.
I have a question because I am a huge Star Wars nerd. I know all the continuity. I don't say that as a brag or a boast, but I also know that there's certain things which are very, very important to nerds. So Adam, Steve stole the last question, so I'm gonna send another question to you. And actually this is for everyone who may know anything about Star Wars. I say the Star Wars Holiday Special is canon. You have the original cast, you have George Lucas attached. There's no reason that it's not canon. They use actual footage from Star Wars like B-roll in the Holiday Special, so it has to be canon. Am I wrong?
You are correct. I think even more so now than then, because Favreau's put it into Mandalorian. Yeah, I think so. And to point out, you talked about this, how special the special is. Like, it's the only other spot you get the principal cast together. Even the new trilogy, the sequel trilogy, the 3 principals are never together.
They never are together.
This is it. So it's the original trilogy and
And I think there's something else that's important. Is the road to greatness is not without stumbles. And if you don't understand the stumbles, you don't understand the greatness.
Anyone else want to weigh in on a canon question?
It's as canon as anything can be. It was filmed, it existed, the characters are in it, they did a better job of bringing back the core actors than The Force Awakens did. I don't know.
He's right.
I don't know what else to say. Yeah, it's canon.
I think it became a canon it became part of the canon for me when Disney Plus did this Lego Star Wars Holiday Special, and obviously George let them do that, and they had a Daisy Ridley doll that looked like Rosie O'Donnell, I thought. But the idea that they would reference the Star Wars Holiday Special and Life Day and all that stuff, which of course was ferociously taboo in Lucasfilm for decades, that meant that ultimately in their own way, in his own way, he was embracing it. If only to continue now to play the role of the curmudgeon, like Harrison does. Whenever it comes up, suddenly he has a character he goes into. And I think George does the same thing.
Well, I think it's really extraordinary too, because it's taken on like 4 different lives. Like it aired, some people remembered it, some people didn't, but no details. It becomes mythical, like this thing that, was it a fever dream, did it happen? And then in the mid-90s, it becomes a VHS tape that starts getting dubbed and traded around. Oh, it did exist, isn't it shit? Let's put it on Friday night and get it right. You know, and it becomes this thing that it's mocked like crazy. Then it gets onto the internet, and it's got this next layer to it of people just dissecting it, and well, how did it this, and what is the thing? And then the 4th stage, it's like beloved. It's suddenly embraced. It's had these different.
Like every time there's a Star Wars movie, it surfaces again.
Yes.
You can't kill it with a lightsaber. It just keeps coming back. But I have to say, I don't know if this was in the interview. When it began surfacing on the internet, just as an internet thing, before there was keyboard warfare and all of that, George was getting serious threats from people because they felt betrayed, because there had been the 3 movies that had become like, Torah to them. I mean, it was absolutely biblical. And where did this thing come from? When he was messing around with these characters that they had taken into their lives, and he was scared.
So they had no context.
They had no. And then the internet just kept happening. It died, but every time these new movies, each time one comes out, I can tell you, I get a call from somebody saying, "Tell us about that Star Wars holiday special."
Yeah, I wrote Tim Burton's first movie. I've gotten 10 times more interviews about the Star Wars holiday special than Frankie Winnie.
And you know what? This isn't even the final version of the movie. This is the one we brought to festivals. But there is a version. We sat down with Steve Sansweet, who's the former head of fan relations, and Steve also confirmed the story about if I had a hammer and all the time, I'd collect every copy and destroy it. He was sitting with George backstage, I believe in Australia, and George reflected that quote to him. So that's in it, and there's a lot more in terms of props and other things. We sit with Gus Lopez, who has some of the original costumes from Dan Sequence and Patton Oswalt, and so there's an extra layer to it. It's just there's a reason we're sitting here again still talking about it. And I don't know, is it the reason because it's become taboo, or is it, what is that enduring quality that's imbued in the special itself? And then maybe it's a mixture of both. I don't know if we'll ever demystify it, but the situation we're in is this is something that's been under lock and key. And like they tell Mark Hamill, don't talk about it. I tried to get Mark to be in this, and I think it still is a pact with George. It's like, I can't do it, which is, it's interesting that, we're here 40-something years later, and there's still like, I can't, but you're watching these things, infiltrate theme parks and action figures, and like you're getting it in Mandalorian, and there's the Faithful Wookiees available to watch on Disney+. So maybe we're reaching that point, maybe the 50th anniversary of the special, and in 2028 they'll finally like say, oh, you know what, 50 years, it'll be like, the Kennedy Files or something. It'll have reached that point where they're allowed to talk about it. I don't know, maybe there is that little handshake with George, but I think maybe when that deal happened, like with Disney, there was still something that's like, you can do everything you want with Star Wars, but you still can't here at the special.
Steve, you want to jump in?
I was going to say, I think it's failure, and I think that there's a marvelous Jonathan Rinsler quote when he says, it's really hard being up there when everyone is rooting against you to fail, when you're that big. And to me, that was what, there's 2 favorite points I have. One is, I agree with Adam. We did the first interviews. I had found a lot of the original people from the crew. So there was writers, and there was Lenny on that first trip, and of course Bruce had to go to town. He would make the first shoot, but we did about 10 interviews. Larry Ross, there's Larry Ross out there. There are some Star Wars special people actually in the audience.
Raise your hand. Yeah, please raise your hand if you were a part of the Star Wars special. Brian?
Can I real quick, they're the acrobats right there. There's our 2 of the acrobats. Antar.
Please stand, please, so we can recognize it.
One of the original air there's Eugene, the conductor after that. Mickey Herman is here, I believe. Mickey Herman, the liaison to the special from George Lucas. No? Come on. I think that's his name. And Larry Ross, who was in it also, interviewed. Larry. I just wanted to say that comment, there was 2 points that there was 2 parts that just really blew my mind. We spent 3 full days interviewing a lot of people, and we just crammed all these people in just to get a jump start on a lot of people, Steve Binder and so forth. And I did all the interviews, and Jeremy was, listening and, doing, he was doing sound, and he didn't say a thing like for 10 interviews, not a thing. And then all of a sudden, and I would say anything else? No, okay. Out of the blue, the only thing he said during the whole 3 days of 10 interviews is that amazing question that he asks Lenny when he says, would you have taken your name off the special? He just all of a sudden blurts it out. And it was like, that to me is what's so great about collaboration, when, he just comes out with this complete, like, I think I know this subject so well, he completely comes up with a whole theme, literally just drops it in my hand. The other part that I thought was really special was, I had talked to I worked for Jay Leno, for the Tonight Show with Jay Leno, and I had asked Jay if he would do an interview, because I knew if he wanted to do it, he might do one for me, because I knew him. And he's like, I don't know, I'm not a Star Wars fan. And I said, well, it doesn't really matter. He said, what is it? I don't know what it is. And he has kind of ADHD, thank you. That's part of my ADD that I can't say it correctly. That's my OCD in my ADD. So I asked, and then I said, well, what it is, it's this awful special that he did, and people make fun of it and everything. And it's like, yeah, well, I did the 10 o'clock show. I did the Jay Leno show. That thing. People laughed at me. What am I going to laugh at him? And it was that feeling that he had about making fun of someone else that really made me think about how sad that is to have something like that. And I heard Matthew Robbins say something, one of the screenwriters says something, it's the drag when everything isn't always a hit. And then Donny Osmond I remember him regretting about some outtakes about him saying that he was very sad, he never really liked working on the Donny and Marie show. And then Jonathan Rinzler, which is very profound. And I remember I had asked Pete Sears from the Jefferson Starship to play some blues because we wouldn't have to license it. Not because it was sad or anything, but I thought it's 3-chord music that we won't have to license. I just needed some B-roll. I said, please just play some blues. And he played this beautiful blues stuff. And I would just, I'm a field producer at heart, and you just always cover yourself and shoot B-roll. Most of the time you never use it. I just wanted to do it. And then I thought, there's this great, so I laid in the music and put in some of the sadder parts about failure. And then every time Kyle brought some more younger celebrities in, those people would talk about failure. And then I think there's a great thing that Adam got Kevin Smith. Kevin Smith was very profound about failure. And that ending last 2-3 minutes is, to me, what's my little contribution. I felt like that's my heart. And I remember cutting it, and I don't remember I've heard back from Kyle originally, but I was so scared of it because I thought, we're gonna come off so hypocritical. Like Don Rickles used to do 2 hours of just killing people on stage, and then at the end he'd go, you know what, but when we were in the Army, everyone was together, and he kind of apologized to everyone. I thought, we're gonna come off like a bunch of hypocrites. But Jeremy really liked it, and it's in the film, and I really appreciated him being open-minded, because it could come off as being kind of hypocritical, like we had fun with this for so long, and now we're just feeling sorry for him. But anyway.
We're coming down to the end, and I think there are a couple things I want to get, and also maybe the audience members who want to weigh in. Adam, let me ask you this question. As we talk about the totality of the impact of the Star Wars Holiday Special and also the documentary, Disturbance in the Force. If Disney Plus one day put this on Disney Plus, would you take any credit for that?
I don't see that happening. Just in Disney's response to, like, I went to Disney and I said, we're doing this. This would be the perfect thing for you to finally embrace the movie. And I had I think I'm in this group, I had the conversations with Disney because I, at the time, had a company with Disney. So I was employed by Disney. And we got everything from no to being ghosted to starting to be a little worried, like, are they gonna come in? Like, there was a thing where I was pitching to Jeremy and Steve, like, maybe the doc is about Lucasfilm trying to shut down our doc about the holiday special.
At first they liked it. At
Yeah.
first they was like, this could work.
Yeah.
And we got a,
I think it went up the chain, and then they were like, no. So I don't see it happen. I really
Wasn't the first reaction, not to interrupt, sorry, wasn't the first reaction, Disney Plus really liked it, but then they're like, there's just one little caveat, you have to get it approved by Lucasfilm.
Yeah,
Just a
that's
little
right.
thing.
That's right. We actually took this out as a pitch, even though we had shot a lot of stuff. Like we wanted to set it up somewhere. So we did pitch it to Disney for Disney Plus, and they were like, of course, but Lucasfilm has to approve. And I do remember it went up. Like it was proposed, and we got
other
enough.
people liked it, but there's other places they're just kind of afraid then of Disney too. And they're like, why is it on Disney? You know, are we gonna get in trouble if we touch this? So there's a little bit of that. There's always fear when you play and or talk about someone else's IP. But like I said, there's not a mean bone in this, and it's an honest look at a piece of history that hasn't been looked at.
Let me close out with this. I started you with a question when I said the Star Wars Holiday Special, what came to mind. I would like to end with this. Given we've all seen the documentary now, Disturbance in the Force, and I think we have some perspective, added perspective. I would like to ask all of you, what do you think the legacy or the ultimate import of the Star Wars Holiday Special will be? Let's say 50 years from now when most of us are gone. What do you think they might say about the Star Wars Holiday Special? Because we know that Star Wars is still going to be here. Theme parks are gone. Who wants to take the first stab at that?
I think it will be a footnote in the Star Wars canon. I mean, the Star Wars canon will, as you say, it'll be around because, you know, we are reading things from 100 years ago, not 200 years ago. But I don't think this thing will. I think what the interesting about it was such a strange thing that a documentary was made about it. That's really the most interesting idea. Is we had no idea we would ever be doing something that somebody would be picking over the bones of. And it's fabulous that it's happened, and that we're still around to actually have a panel like this. But I think that it will be a very small, a footnote in I think maybe in the film schools they will say, well, look at this TV show was so bizarre that a documentary was made about it. So, that will, I think, live.
Yeah, I think people say this is part of the Star Wars canon, and sometimes canons misfire.
Well, I just want to go back to all the things being said about failure and stuff. And of course, failure still exists, and we've all failed at different times, and it's always going to be there. Movies are going to do well or they're not. But, you know, as crazy as the internet is and the world has gotten, nothing goes away anymore. So everything finds an audience now. I mean, you know, Howard the Duck. There are Howard the Duck fans of that movie. I was talking to somebody about the Terry Gilliam films, and we were talking about Time Bandits in Brazil, and my favorite's, you know, The Adventures of Baron Munchausen. I said, I've never heard that from anybody ever. Like, you couldn't find a good review. With enough time, everything gets embraced. You know, Hook. There's Hook fans. wear t-shirts.
It's a good score.
What about Waterworld?
Great score.
Anybody?
But you know what I mean, like,
Which one? Waterworld? Anyone?
Waterworld has a bunch of fans.
It's a great stunt spectacular.
It's this, yeah,
They
nothing.
show at Universal, don't they?
Nothing
Yes.
completely goes away. And because of the internet and people finding each other instead of, you know, in the back of Starlog, you know, mailing off for a pen pal or something, it's much easier to find like-minded people now. Nothing really ever goes away. And I think
Ishtar,
that's
Battlefield Earth.
Say again?
Ishtar, Battlefield Earth.
Whoa, wait, no, actually, Ishtar's a good movie. Ishtar's actually quite funny.
For a while, the joke was, excuse me, I have to go take an Ishtar.
Yes. But I don't think
That joke went away, but it will come back.
I think it's going to be a while for Battlefield Earth, but Ishtar's not bad.
It was two guys trying to get to the youth market.
The
They
songs
were
were
trying to
good.
sell themselves to a younger audience.
Yes, and Paul Williams did the songs, and that was
Yeah,
fun.
and with Elaine May, who was a different sensibility from them. They have some very, very good stuff in it, I will say.
We'll do a documentary on Ishtar next.
that.
Fan base.
They do it, absolutely.
I think, you know, like you said, probably a footnote, and you look back 100 years, but with perspective, what they're probably going to talk about is how it had an impact on George Lucas, the person. And I've met George a few times, I've had to talk to him. I know one of the most painful things, you know, he reflected to me when I made a film with Families we talked about, and at that point, the studio took it away and totally fucked with it. And I know he had a similar experience. He hated what they did with THX and how they treated him. And I think the Star Wars Holiday Special was a lesson in failure, as the movie states. And I think you see George Lucas emerge from that as a very different person. As you also reflected, you wouldn't see something like that in 1981. And that really holds true. That's because what he did was go, wow, I've got something here. I've got a golden ticket, and I'm going to shape my destiny in a very specific way. And I know now not to let this happen again. And that's why Lucasfilm became the company it is. It moved out of Los Angeles. It's up in San Francisco. He made that move while this was happening. And he became a very different type of creator. And I think that is one of the enduring legacies of the special, is that because it was maligned, because it wasn't what he wanted, it changed his destiny as a filmmaker. And I think looking back, that's probably will become more exaggerated when people look at George Lucas' legacy.
Steve and Adam? Or Adam and Steve, it's up to you.
One thing I just want to say that's interesting. Bruce said, well, you know, maybe there was a better way to tell the story, the Star Wars story. I think people wanted the movie, and Star Wars at that time could not be on TV. It would not ever meet any expectation, and we're at a point now where there's only Star Wars on TV. And it's kind of crumbled the business in a way, because they had to, I mean, Mandalorian, I've heard, this last season was as much as 40 million an episode. Right, now they say 20, I've heard 30, I've heard 40, but when you're making it,
They went to Jack Black.
yeah, television can't sustain that. It was made, as you can see, it was people singing in a wide shot, right? Like, so I think, I don't know that the special could have ever been a success, and I do think, just budget-wise and expectation-wise, and I do think now that Star Wars is on television, it is setting up, like, I think in a lot of ways made a lot of problems in the business for expectations on what a show should be. So yeah, I think that's just something that I've always, watching the doc, I've always been like, oh man, how could they have succeeded?
Steve, you want to close this out? Any last thoughts?
I would just say that I think Mark Hamill really said it best, where he was pleading with George to just let go of it and not necessarily release it. He was basically begging him to just stop of, you know, trying to protect it and trying to hide it. All this energy that he was spending, and show that you're human. And I think that really is, you know, hopefully the message that we give him. I think that George really comes off fairly well here. You know, I think if he saw it, he would. And I know there's back and forth about whether he's seen it or not, but I think he would like it, and I think he would I think he would feel appreciated and that we saw another side to him.
Please put your hands together for Steve Kozak. Adam Goldberg. Kyle Newman. Jason Lenzi. Bruce Vilanch. And Leonard. Ladies and gentlemen, for Mo Kelly. Thank you, Mo.
We didn't overshoot. I don't think we overshot. I mean, we did some interviews that didn't air. We interviewed some people that didn't air. Sorry.
Not upset.
You made the book though. But I don't think there was a try. We didn't overshoot. I thought, gosh, I don't even know what that would. I would say probably 80 hours. I mean, when we interviewed Bruce was an hour and a half. Lenny was an hour and a half. I mean, look at to it. How could you stop at an hour and a half?
How many hours did it take you to edit?
2. Well, it's gone through many versions, and as Kyle said, there's a whole other version that's.
It would have taken longer if Missy Welch had edited it. There would have been tears.
I did a 20 minutes, there's about 20 minutes of brand new material in the new cut. So, a lot of hours,
So Steve, out of all those clips you had, what was the most expensive one you had to pay for, and were there some you could not afford?
Why do we have to get into that? We have, I actually am very proud of the fair use that we did use. I mean, we fair used the Star Wars Holiday Special. I think that we were very, Jeremy, when he cut it, he really did kind of take my lead on what to use, when's too much. He knew that I was the clearance person, the fair use person. And he did respect it, and our fair use report was pretty amazing. I mean, I was very proud of it, actually. I kind of did a big I told you so after we got our report to Jeremy. We were very, if you look at it, there's nothing exploitive about, which I consider the word to think of, there's nothing exploitive. We don't use a ton of footage from the special. We use it when it's needed, when we're really just documenting a point and illustrating a point. Really don't just throw it out there for a joke. And I'm really proud of that because I think it is a really conservative way to fair use. I mean, we really didn't, splash for the reasons of the respect of the IP, and the second reason is it's just awful. It's just awful to watch. There wasn't really a lot you really wanted to watch in it, Sorry, Yuchi. I mean, sorry.
When I put it on, I like it.
Woo!
You just watch it for 2 hours like this. I like Next Generation. I put that on. I can leave that on. I can leave on Antiques Roadshow. Like if it's Christmas time, I put the special on, and it's people are like, "What's this?" I'm like, "Star Wars Holiday Special." Like, they made that, and it just keeps playing.
The one thing I have to explain, I got in trouble a week ago at FanX, and I was talking about, someone asked me about my love for Star Wars, and I guess they just assumed I was an obsessive Star Wars fan, and I'm really not, and I said something like, I'm not a tremendously huge Star Wars fan, and like all these people started like booing, like I had said something offensive, and I wasn't trying to say something offensive I mean, I have 7 kids. I named one kid Lucas. That's not nothing. But really, the whole key to our the Star Wars nuts was getting Kyle involved, who is a huge Star Wars brain, and getting Jason. Jason prepped me for every single interview I did. Up and down, and because he just knew all that stuff. I didn't know all the little. The weird Star Wars stuff that, respectfully speaking, that Kyle and Jason love to hear. And Adam is Adam's got quite a brain on the Star Wars stuff too. So
you've got a question for
First off, I want to say it was really well done. I'm actually one of the people that watched it. I was fortunate. I guess in '77, I was 14 years old. So what I start to think of is back then I'd gone to the original Star Wars film, and then the next thing you start to see anything that becomes an evolution of who are these characters of this film that we just watched was really the end point, I believe, was this holiday special, right? We didn't really know much about the characters. We knew Chewbacca through the first film. It becomes a really interesting cross point, right? Because if you look at 1977 and the other type of material, like it was brilliant to bring in Donnie and Marie, because that point in time was variety shows, right? But there's another part of this that becomes interesting, I think, that you might have really taken another angle. I think of the book Wicked, and how that book opened up to the question over time into how we look at character development, and when we see a character in the film, how much do we know about that? How much do we want to ask about it? Right? Which I think was really done when we look at the book Wicked and the musical. So there becomes this hunger that is really important to ask the reason of not the outcome of how this was formed, which is a point of time and space in which other variety shows were being created. So there's already like this nexus, right, of variety shows. So, but if we take away that part, I start to look at the film in a different way, in the TV show in a different way of the hunger that was really in the incubus of, well, how do we know about these characters? What do we know? And so, am I wrong in thinking of this as the first step towards, it's not just what we're seeing in the film, but this is really kind of the backstory of who are these characters. There's a character development thing that I think becomes important to why this TV show was important. I'm wondering if any of you feel that way, or if it was just...
There's an elasticity to the George Lucas, more than I think people want to accept. There's an elasticity to the way he treats characters, the comedy that also works into his movies. He thought there was a lot of goofy things in A New Hope, and when people saw The Phantom Menace, they were shocked. They're like, what's going on? You did some things with these characters I wasn't expecting, or there's weird humor and stuff. And for him, I think he thinks it's always been in the DNA. Some of those weirder things in Return of the Jedi, or Strange Little Creatures, and so I think this, if you look back, seeing everything that he put out, he checked out. He's done with Star Wars. He's not working on it really anymore. Everything in his lexicon of Star Wars, there is some quirky weirdness. The very first 5-page document, I think he talks about how he wanted to be like a Hobbit family in a hovel, and he really wanted to get into the lifestyle of Wookiees. And it was like a serious thing. It wasn't a variety thing. It was just like, this is the story of a Wookiee family, and this is the way Wookiees live. And he's a cultural anthropologist because he studies mythology. But I think in terms of like you guys said, like it was him being a reporter. You know, he was reporting from this world that you knew nothing about, and so his world is really rich and there's dynamic and there's obviously comedy and there's tragedy and there's trauma and there's happiness and loss, and it's all in there. Star Wars has everything. That's the special genre of it. So there is something with what you're saying with these characters, and he was pushing some of these boundaries of, oh, is that their lifestyle in this world? Is this, you know, there's a clip in the next version of the film, Kevin Smith talks about, there's a commercial, there's an Energizer commercial with like a Darth Vader and a little pink Energizer bunny. And he's like, did we learn any lessons here? Like, here we are, it's like, it was like early 90s, and it's like, this he thought, you know, really shit on the Darth Vader guy. It's like, there you are in 1983, and you're like, you've licensed him to be sitting there with an Energizer bunny? Like,
So there's questions like, did he learn, or maybe he's always okay with the weirdness and the boundaries being down on his characters, like he doesn't take it that seriously. But it's an interesting question, yeah, beyond the context of the special, like the beginnings of the next level of characters. You know, there's that Splinter of the Mind's Eye book came out in '78. You know, that's the characters. This is the other thing going on in '78.
I'm sorry, I have to go to a symposium on the Brady Bunch Variety Hour. So I have to leave. Thank you very much. I'll get out of this couch. They're my working impressions.
Mine is short, I can promise, and simpler. First of all, to the gentleman on the couch, though, I would watch a variety show, just you two, all the time. Steve, Steve, you said you're writing a book with that, or you wrote a book. Did the book come first? And what's in the book? How does it supplement the movie, or you know, add to it?
The book was while we were sitting around during COVID, because this was all done during COVID. Most of the interviews were shot during COVID. People were really good sports, but at one point, you know, we just kind of just stopped and paused, and it was just getting too ugly and scary, and we were just kind of hibernating and kind of weathering it out. And that's when I just started writing, and just to do something. I really didn't think I had a book. And then, man, I mean, I can't believe it actually got published by a publisher. Like not an Amazon self-published thing, like someone really is publishing it. There's just a lot of stuff, you know, Kyle's mentioned a couple of the stories. You know, a lot of, there's a great story about the Manson family, like, for example, well, I'll save that. The
When's the book out?
On November 15th.
November 15th.
Lots of fanfic, Itchy and Diane Carroll, their adventures, parts of the book.
Two questions. One, who came up with the concept, and how did you all come together to create this?
I'll tell the story in order. So, I actually was on Mo Kelly's. I was working with Steve Binder. His producer called up Steve Binder and asked him to do an interview because it was that time of year, and he wanted to interview someone, and Steve couldn't do it. He said, "Why don't you call Steve Kozak? He's considering working on a project." So, Mo was one of the first people I actually spoke with. I had lunch with Ian Marshall and pitched him on it. It's the first thing I did, and Jason Lenzi, who, and then when I got Jeremy involved, I told you I got Jeremy involved, then Jeremy like totally went nuts, and he got Kyle involved, and that completely expedited things. Kyle had a real sense of the special, much more than really we had by far, and he understood all the intricacies and the people to really get and to focus on, and then he got Adam involved, and Adam's power was just, I mean, every time we used his name, people who were saying no to me said yes, and that's, you know, towards the end, halfway through, those interviews were expedited because we had his name to us, and thank you again for you two.
We have time for one more question, and we'll have to close out.
So something that I was realizing is perhaps also a theme of this story is perhaps, and one or two things the same, is about how the relationship of TV and movies has changed, where I think part of the thing was, at the time that this was made, TV was certainly thought of as a very lower form than movies, hence the reason why George Lucas kind of didn't want to even be involved at all with it. And now there actually are TV shows that tell the Star Wars story along with the movies that are being made.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna say something that may not be that popular, but I love George Lucas just like everybody does. But I do think a lot of the time he was kind of making it up as he went. There was a huge canvas and a lot of details and a lot of story points. But like everyone else, you know, Star Wars took him by surprise too, that it did what it did, and then it became, you know, the family tree and the story, everything got tightened after that. So this to me is, yeah, it could be opening up, trying a universe and saying Life Day is a thing and this will be canon now. Or they wouldn't have even used the word canon at all. It was trying to keep this thing alive, not really knowing if the second one was going to work. And you know, you said something interesting. I think you said something about George where he's got this pattern. You see it in all these different points in his career where he's told something happens or someone kind of betrays him or someone takes the scissors to the, and he says that's never going to happen again. Or like, I'm never letting that happen again. You know, I'm not going to have to get on my knees and beg for money again. And he does it every time. So I think, you know, when they made the deal and he got to, you know, get merchandise after Empire and everything else, I think that's when it starts to tighten. So, you know, I think we all kind of love this wilderness, this weirdness of nothing's figured out. It's all just kind of, you know, Han Solo, to even posit Han Solo being married to a Wookiee is mind-blowing to me. But that's where his head was. It was just another idea that never really went anywhere. But then it starts to get, would you agree with that kind of?
Yeah, and you know, the other thing I think is very important is to remember, this isn't just a filmmaker promoting a film and saying, I'm gonna do a holiday special because I've got this cool movie I've got. George Lucas is an independent filmmaker on a scale like no one else. And no one gives him the credit for that. Yeah. He always took the money he made, reinvested it into the next movie. Empire Strikes Back is his money. Return of the Jedi. He didn't just make a simple layup. He said, I have the greatest villain of all time, and I'm gonna go make an even greater villain. And I'm gonna humanize my villain. No one gives him credit for that. That's all on his own time. So the holiday special is him saying, I gotta keep my investment alive. I wanna make, if I'm gonna make TV movies, if this doesn't work, I'm gonna make Splinter of the Mind's Eye, I'm gonna do these other things. I'm definitely gonna make the sequel. My money is on the line. So there is more at stake. And I think that's why he's making these choices. That's why he's saying, I gotta do anything to keep this alive. And then he goes and he changes with non-linear editing and balance Pixar. Like he's always putting his money back into technology, innovation, education. And it's sad to see the way people treat him. You know, his legacy is incredible as an independent filmmaker.
I think he's the most successful independent filmmaker of all time, right?
I mean,
in terms of prequels,
in terms of just pure impact on the zeitgeist. We don't look at him as like, oh, this Hollywood guy. He left Hollywood, he's like, screw everyone. I'm going to San Francisco, you're awful, and I'm going to put all my money into my own creations. And so the holiday special is him saying, I have to do anything I can, you know, to keep my investment going. You know, that's why he got the action figures, and that's why he believed in himself.
It's almost like he starts to breathe a sigh of relief after Empire. Yes. Once Empire works, then it's like, oh, okay, now this is really a phenomenon. This is gonna keep going. But that wilderness between 77 and 80 is still, that's why I think it's so fascinating. It's the most fun part of Star Wars, is to look at that and go, it could have gone any which way. Nobody saw it coming.
But he had lightning in a bottle twice.
Yeah. Yeah.
I hate to jump in here because we could do this as nerds all night long. And I know for a fact because I've done it before. But please, can we put our hands together one more?
I didn't answer this correctly. We asked what was prompted this. There was a huge element that helped this special, this documentary, and that's that this subject had already been done before really well. If anyone remembers the Goldberg special, the Goldberg's episode, by Adam Goldberg, the creator of Goldberg, we actually did an entire episode about the Star Wars Holiday Special. You know, that has kind of, it's kind of like grounded it a little there at ABC Disney, I think, and given us a little bit of a peek in. So thanks for being a great panel. Yeah.
Let's keep those round of applause going to the rest.
Hey, look at those names to the left. They are part of the Skywalking Force, our Patreon.
Become a producer yourself and check out all the Disney Plus themed bonus content available depending on the level you subscribe.
Become a member of the elite Skywalking Force at skywalkingforce.com.